We are talking about making New Year's resolutions that stick. My name is Jeffrey, and I've been coaching a variety of people from almost any walk of Western life, at least for about the last 23 years or so. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Why your resolutions don't stick. If you see the live video here, I have a stool, and it's a really trusty stool. I can sit on this stool. I can lean on it. It stands up pretty well. It does its job. But why does this thing work so well? Why does it stand up? Well, it's got legs, right? If it didn't have the legs, it would just be a seat on the floor. It wouldn't do a very good job. And that's a pretty good argument. I think I would have to agree with you there. But here's the challenge. The truth is, this stool could very easily end up on the ground, knocked over, totally useless. If all I did, now not this one's got 4 legs, but in the case of the 3-legged stool, you miss even one leg on that stool and the stool falls over. And what really stops people from actually getting their resolutions to become a reality, the dream in your head or the change you need to make, the thing is a good idea, but you just haven't done it yet. You know what to do, but you didn't do what you know. What stops them from actually getting that done is that they don't just need any one thing. They need a combination of these, in this case, in this metaphor, legs. And so legs don't make the stool stand up. It's a number of legs combined in concert that work together to keep this stool doing its job. And so I'll give you a couple examples in the realm of resolutions here. I've had many clients who've set many goals, had a lot of resolutions, just to give you a sense of course, answering this question, why resolutions don't stick. So here's a client that I worked with. This woman was extremely powerful, very confident, totally resilient. She was like Teflon. All the problems bounced off of her, and she could just handle anything. And she did not come up with a clear resolution. You could call it a goal if you want, but she just didn't ever come up with anything clear. I remember distinctly having conversations with her, and she would say things like, I don't really know. I don't know what I want. I don't know really what's important to me. And there was just this, it was almost like a mantra that she kept saying. It's like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And so she never ultimately came down to, here's the resolution that I actually want to make. So the result was she didn't do anything. Was she capable of doing a lot more? Yes. Was she somebody who, with a really clear resolution, probably would have made it happen and would have done it? Absolutely. In fact, this particular client that I'm thinking of, she was so powerful with producing real results that anytime she actually had a goal, it would happen. And it would happen really powerfully, really quickly, and really effectively as well. One of the more effective individuals that I've worked with recently, at least. She just decided she didn't know what she wanted, didn't clarify a resolution, did nothing. And by the way, at the end of the time that I worked with her, she was complaining, is like, oh, this coaching I'm working with you on, like, I'm not getting any results. Of course, she hadn't come up with any clear resolutions, and she probably would have gotten results. In fact, I almost guarantee she would have gotten results had she just done that alone. Another client, they were actually very clear on their resolution. This individual had several resolutions, actually. And he was also accountable. Like, he would always show up to his sessions. He always had, like, whatever commitments he made, he would follow through on them. But the resolution he made was something that he had been stuck with for a while. Like, it was a resolution that didn't stick. And so he came to me and said, you're my coach. You're going to really help me transform this. And I worked with him on this particular resolution. I won't get into the details on it, but he had this mental block that kept getting in the way, and he never made a change to think of it like his own internal psychology, the way he felt about that resolution, like something around what it took for him to actually follow through on it. And so even though he was, one of the more reliable and clear clients that I've worked with, at least recently, didn't make much progress, made a little bit, but not enough, like not anywhere near what he probably could have. It was just that mental block that stopped him. One more client I'll share. This individual, he clarified his resolution, very motivated, very committed. Like, you could tell he had very, unlike client number 2, very powerful psychology, but he got busy. And in fact, one of the reasons why his resolution just evaporated after a few months was because he was so busy with everything else that was being piled on him. Very, very clear individual and a motivated, committed person. So, was pretty good at producing results for everyone other than him. So when people would put him up to something or give him an assignment or give him some work or give him a gig, he would jump through all their hoops, And so he got busy, he lost track, and he eventually forgot about that resolution that he made. And like I said, that resolution is gone now, as far as I can tell. Just totally evaporated, almost like he had never even made it in the first place. So these clients, in this metaphor that we were talking about, they were all missing at least one of the legs of their three-legged stool. And just like a leg on a stool, their strengths were amazing, but they were unable to stabilize their resolutions. They were unable to keep them up. They were unable to elevate and structure a resolution where it could stay upright, so to speak, stay resilient, stay strong, stay sound. And so no stability to those resolutions without all three legs. So these are, maybe not the happiest examples, but the truth is none of these clients I had worked with and no client I've ever met, there's nothing wrong with any of these individuals. People are not broken. They're just missing something that would make their resolution stick. So let's talk about what it actually takes. There's a recipe to make any resolution stick, any resolution that's humanly possible, at least, stick. And once you have the recipe for making that resolution stick, you can make anything stick. Again, anything within human reason, of course. So if you wanted to create a great meal for yourself or your family, you wanted to bake a cake, you wanted to whip up a souffle, unless you're already a chef and you have great mastery over just going into the kitchen and figuring stuff out, you probably are going to follow a recipe. The better you follow that recipe, the better chances are the outcome is going to be, assuming the recipe's for what you actually want. My mother, I was with her during the holidays, and she's notorious for not following recipes. So I gave her a recipe for one of the meals we were making for Christmas dinner, and she said, "Great, I see the recipe. I'll go ahead and take care of this." And then what we got out of the recipe was something that wasn't quite edible, right? And I said, "What happened? I gave you the recipe." And she said, "Well, you know me, I don't follow a recipe. I just decided to do this and this and this instead. And I figured that would be better," right? And it wasn't exactly better. So there are recipes available to us that help us to accomplish things that we wouldn't normally accomplish unless we're already just naturally amazing in that area. And in this case, we're talking about the recipe for making these resolutions stick. So there's three aspects of the recipe. There's three ingredients, if you will: psychology, the resolution itself, and then accountability. So psychology, like the emotions, the resilience that you have, this inner game that you play with yourself about your motivations, your values, your beliefs. We'll talk about that in a second. Like that actually makes a difference. The resolution itself, without that, you can't make something stick that doesn't exist, right? So obviously there needs to be a resolution. This is the one that really most people actually get. They actually come up with a resolution, if they actually have a resolution in mind, at least. And some people just don't have resolutions. And so they're missing this leg. By the way, some individuals will say, "I don't make resolutions. The reason I don't make them is because they don't work. They don't stick. It doesn't work for me." But the truth is, if they would simply make the resolution, they would at least have that one leg. That doesn't guarantee they have the other two. Maybe they have issues with these other areas. But the reason the resolution didn't stick for you or for them or for whoever it was that we're talking about was a lack of making the resolution in the first place, if that's where you stand with it. If it's like, "Oh, I'm not even going to make a resolution," well, then you're going to have a problem actually making a resolution stick that you didn't make, right? So pretty simple, but it's absolutely crucial. And there's many, many people who could totally make resolutions happen for them, accomplish a bunch of goals that they set, New Year's or otherwise, and yet they don't, simply because there's a lack of that second leg. So it actually does matter, even if it seems like it's so minor. And then finally, accountability. Without a level of accountability, there's some things maybe you don't need accountability for, but chances are then you don't need to really make a resolution for it either. Right? A resolution is usually being made around something that is important to you and you want to change, but you haven't quite gotten yourself to do it yet. There's something that is holding you back, or some challenge with it, or you haven't had time. Like something's going on that has it such that needs to be a resolution rather than, "Oh yeah, it's just something I want, so I got it." Right? Does that make sense? So a resolution is usually not something that is just easy or automatic, or that everyone gets, it just falls out of the sky. unconsciously for this, we need to make some conscious effort usually around a resolution, which is why it's a resolution in the first place. So accountability makes a difference with that, because for many of us, we know what to do. We're motivated to do it, but we just didn't get around to it. We just didn't follow through. And there's maybe a lack of accountability for us that if that had been put in place, like it's a missing piece, it's a missing leg, we could have stood that stool up then. So that's a missing ingredient for so many of us, is just simple accountability. So these are the three legs on this stool. These are the three ingredients for making your resolutions stick. And I'm going to share with you now in the coming couple of minutes some of the details around each of these three ingredients, how to employ each of them, so you really have a map for using them. And then finally, we're going to talk about how they interact together, because there's synergies between these three. Is this starting to make sense, by the way, as to why so many resolutions don't happen? It's like, how many of us actually use all of these three ingredients when we actually are up for a resolution? It's like almost nobody's doing this. And some resolutions still happen. And it's like, frankly, when people talk about, well, resolutions don't happen, they shouldn't be saying, well, resolutions aren't likely to happen and resolutions are a waste of time and they're not possible. We should be amazed by how many resolutions happen despite the lack of psychological preparation and even making a resolution itself and any accountability to speak of. I mean, people are amazingly producing results despite themselves, despite the lack of really the ideal, at least, recipe, in my opinion, for this. So put these on a little bit of a Venn diagram here, and we'll talk a little bit more detail on each of these, talk about some of the interactions, and then we'll drill down and we'll go a lot deeper, starting with psychology. So this psychology, think of this like a timeline, like going from left to right. We're starting with psychology. We all have a psychology already. So this is really where we start. Even before we make a resolution statement, we have an already existing psychology, do we not? Does that make sense? And so this is where the beginning of the resolution timeline, whether it's before New Year's or whatever, before we make a resolution, we already got some psychology that is in our favor or working against us. Also, like those individuals I mentioned that complain that resolutions are a waste so they don't make them. Well, that's a psychology, isn't it? If you believe resolutions are a waste, they never come true, in fact, they're counterproductive, that's your psychology about this. Are you even going to make a resolution? You won't even get to step 2. So this is really like the beginning of the process, if you will. So the psychology, as it says here, and I just suggested, it makes the resolution possible and it leads you to make a resolution in the first place. Anytime you've ever made a resolution, set a goal, made a decision, decided on a change, come up with a new intention, even if it didn't come about ultimately for you, or even if it did, the only way it was possible for you to do that was your psychology made it possible. So there's a standing psychology that either makes the rest of this possible. It doesn't guarantee it happens, right? It's not sufficient, but it's required. I think they call it required, but not sufficient, right? It's this absolutely essential, even to make it possible to make a resolution, is the psychology that opens the door to that. So if that's something you're close to, it's like, okay, we're going to need to work on that piece before we can move on to the next one, because your psychology is already closing that door, so to speak. Resolution statement. Well, that's required for any change, right? Like you need to put that change into language. I talk to so many clients who they're like, yeah, I know I want to change something. I know I want more of this or that. It's like, I know my life needs to be different, or my business needs to be different, or my relationship needs to be different, or my new VO career needs to be different. I'm like, okay, great. Well, what are you resolving? What's your goal? What's the change? What do you need to make happen? And they're like, well, I just know it needs to be different. I don't really know. And so that's still required. You got to get this into language, not just have it be some ephemeral idea that's out there in the blue. So that's needed. Think of that like step 2, so to speak. It's something that comes after the psychology that's already standing, but it's still required, and that's still got to happen. And then finally, accountability. Well, if you have a resolution that you've made, you've stated it, you've declared it, you've shared it, you've written it down, whatever. Well, now you got something you could be accountable for, right? So accountability for most of us, with at least the more extraordinary resolutions, not the most minor ones. Sometimes you don't need accountability, but even if it's something that you don't need someone else to push you to do, a lot of times we need our own accountability within ourselves. Does that make sense? So think about something that maybe you didn't want to do, or you were resisting doing, or it was something maybe you were afraid to do, but you resolved to do it. So you made a resolution and then you ultimately did it. was there not a certain amount of commitment and accountability that you somehow you brought about, that you somehow corralled yourself to the point where you said, I'm going to pay attention to this. I'm going to be accountable for this. I'm going to check in on myself to make sure this actually happened, rather than just saying, yeah, I want that. All right, anyway, let's forget about that and move on, right? There was probably still some level of internal accountability. So that's needed to actualize or realize a resolution. Think of this as the last stage. Like once you've got some psychology that makes it possible to even do any of this, then you make a resolution statement, you write it down, you share it. Well, then to actualize that, you got to follow through. Accountability is the cause in the matter of that actually happening. So it's needed to realize that resolution. It causes the resolution to become a persistent reality versus a fluke. By the way, this is the other side of resolutions, and we already talked about this a little bit, whereas somebody will make a statement, they'll say, this is what I'm going to do. They go to the gym a couple times, or they stop eating butter, whatever their resolution is, the change that they make possible with that resolution, but it doesn't persist, right? It's flaky. It's a fluke. It's like, yeah, I went to the gym for a week. I, kissed my husband for a week. I was nice to my kids for a week, whatever the new resolution is. And it's like, it was a fluke because there was no accountability, or there wasn't an extension of that accountability. It worked actually for a while. And people say resolutions don't work. I only did it for a week, or I only did it for a month, or only did it for 3 months. Well, wait a second. If you did it at all after the resolution worked. Maybe it only worked temporarily for you, but the reason it was temporary was because of the lack of the accountability. It wasn't a lack of resolution. Now, could there be psychology issues as well? Well, yeah, and we'll talk about the interactions here in a second in this little Venn diagram. But the point of the matter is, if you did it at all, it worked to the extent to which you did it, to the extent to which you made a change, to the extent to which you accomplished something that you wouldn't normally have accomplished had you not made that statement. But to make that reality persistent, to make it consistent, to make it stable, as we talked about, this is what's missing for so many of us. I coach so many people, and over the last couple decades, I've coached thousands and worked with really over 100,000 individuals in different walks of life, mostly coaches in my business. But what I've noticed is that what's missing for most of them is accountability. Even really amazing people, it's like they just don't have much accountability in their life. And accountability is not like the fun part of making a resolution. In fact, it's the least fun for most of us. It's the Brussels sprouts of our personal growth, But it's really the nutrients that we need. It's a major ingredient. And without it, stool falls over. So these things are needed together, though, as we talked about. So psychology alone, well, it feels good, but doesn't produce anything new. It's great to have a good attitude, but a good attitude without testing, using, and expanding that attitude becomes rotten and fake. It's like hot air, It's like, yeah, I feel really good about this, but you ever known anybody who's like really nice and really motivated and really excited, but they just kind of go around in circles, or they don't actually follow through on all of that? I know that I feel this way a lot. I've got this great psychology, but I don't have the rest sometimes. The rest is needed. So the psychology alone is not enough. Now, that resolution statement, of course, we said you got to have that. You got to put it into words so you even know what's going on, because language is, people used to say change begins in language. It really begins in your psychology, but which makes it possible to continue the change when you actually verbalize it, you put it into words. The words are our way of imputing meaning. It's our way of understanding and clarifying something. If you can't put it into words, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist at all. It doesn't precipitate into something solid. But when you can make a statement that's really, really clear, now it's like, at least I know what this looks like. At least I know what it sounds like. At least I know how that's going to feel. At least I know the dimensions of that. You start to etch it out. You start to create the geometry of it. There's different forms of that, and we'll talk about that. But even the perfect resolution, once you've learned it, becomes hollow and hopeless without emotional resilience, psychology, and accountability to make it happen. So it's like it's just talk. As they say, talk is cheap. The truth is, talk is not cheap. It's just people cheapen talk. We'll talk about what that looks like in accountability. Finally, accountability alone. I know clients who and these are very rare people, but they're really accountable. They're very dutiful. They're very rigorous. They follow through on everything that I ask them to do and that they commit to. But that drill sergeant type of person, they end up getting burnt out, and a lot of times fairly useless without a chief aim, without the emotional resonance to actually make that goal into reality. So accountability alone is mostly a good recipe for burnout. although you still need accountability. Just by itself, it's not enough to hold this stool up. So we need these three together. Each leg depends on the others to make a resolution that sticks. It's the synergy between those legs that carries the power to make dreams into realities. Another way of thinking about that same structure is, if I'm an engineer and I'm building the Empire State Building, it's not just one structure, it's not just one girder, it's not just one beam that is going to keep the building up. I have to do the math on all these different structures in concert together that has this entire ballet of different forces working on one another to keep that building up. Those that remember the 9/11 bombings where the World Trade Center came down, we could see that it stood, but as soon as one part of the structure of that building was compromised, just one of the top floors, the bottom floors hadn't really gotten hurt for the most part. That's at least my understanding of it. And in this metaphor, give me a little rope here. But as soon as those top floors were compromised and they started falling on one another, all of the equations, all of the physics of these different legs coming together, everything went out the window. And so this is why I think it's so important for us to revise our pessimism, thinking that nothing works. It's not that nothing works. It's just you have to have enough of everything to bring it together, right? You have to do more than what you probably think is required to make a resolution stick. So these legs depend on each other. It's the synergy between them that carries the power to make dreams into realities. Now let's talk about the synergies then. So psychology and resolution statement, when you have empowered psychology, right? Not just like any psychology, everybody's got a psychology, but when it's truly empowered and you have a clear resolution statement, like I know what my resolution is and I've clarified it, that brings together alignment. So you've got alignment between how you feel about the resolution and the resolution itself. Your psychology is empowered in context of the resolution. So you could have empowered psychology in general, but if it's not in context of the resolution statement, like, yeah, I love my job, I love working, I love making a lot of money, but I hate relationships. I'm horrible in relationships. And my resolution is to have a great relationship. Not empowered psychology in that context, even though you may have a generally empowered psychology. So alignment, real alignment is, yes, in the area of that resolution, you have empowered psychology. Does that make sense? You can't just be powerful and positive about some other area that has nothing to do with what you're resolving. So actual alignment, how I feel and think about this, is actually in alignment with what I've stated. Does that make sense? So that's alignment. Now, when you have a clear resolution statement and you have total accountability, not just half-ass accountability, not just a little bit accountability, not just accountability once, but like repeated, bringing that in lieu of that resolution, right? So it's again, accountability for that, not just accountability for just things in general. When you combine that statement with accountability in terms of that statement, now you have integrity. I call integrity being your word. So again, like structural integrity in a building keeps it up. When you be your word, that gives you integrity in the world of human results, human behavior, human relationship. If you can't be your word, then these words that we use to communicate with ourselves and others, they don't end up meaning much. That's what makes talk cheap. So talk can be, and words can be, and your promises can be very, very powerful when you be your word. When you're not being your word, probably doesn't help very much. That's a lack of integrity, the way I would describe it, on your part. Now, a lot of people talk about integrity like it's moral, it's ethical, and things like that. I'm not talking about that definition. I'm just talking about it in the realm of growing to the next level and what it takes to actually create that, whatever change or resolution or goal that you need to set. So the combination, the synergy between accountability and that resolution statement, those two combined together brings integrity to that resolution. Make sense? Finally, and there is an interaction between psychology and accountability, for sure. That's why I just call that commitment. It's like your powerful psychology about the accountability. You have full accountability, but you're not like, yeah, I hate this accountability. It's really, it's like, I hate it when people know that I followed through or didn't follow through and they're going to hold me to account for that. I just bothers me or I'm not willing to deal with it or something like that. Well, that's not really commitment. Commitment is, hey, I have powerful psychology. I'm feeling and thinking about my accountability in an empowered way in terms of my resolution. Now we've got commitment that's aligned with that accountability, so to speak. So when you bring not just psychology and resolution statement and accountability together. You end up with these combinations, alignment within yourself, integrity to be your word, and commitment to make it happen. That's what creates a resolution that sticks. Those, think of them like 6 elements, really, but 3 that are at the root of all of it that create the combination of these different things together. Make sense? So one of the biggest challenges I see from my clients is that they're thinking, well, if I just do that, then it'll all work out. And it's never enough, right? It's always more than what they're thinking. And so since their thinking predicates what they do is going to be connected to that, right? Like, this is what I thought I should do, so that's what I did, basically. And then what they did just doesn't amount to what they really wanted. And so what the judgments and the depression and the fear and the upset and the disappointment that comes from that is, I mean, you could imagine in all of humanity, it's pretty tremendous, because people are thinking, well, I should have gotten this, and then they didn't. And it's like, well, that shouldn't be the way it is, but that's the way it is. So I guess there's nothing I can do, versus I got to do a little more, or I got to do a lot more, depending on who you are and where you stand. So now let's drill down on each of these areas. So we're going to start with psychology. So psychology ultimately is really a matter of motivation. If the motivation is empowered, then 9 times out of 10, your psychology is going to be where it needs to be. Again, assuming context of the resolution that you're making. So let's start with motivations. So first things first, when you think about what you want, I know we haven't made a resolution statement yet, but you probably have an idea of what area of your life you want to change, improve, do something about, take action on. So think about your motivations in that area. What you need to do ultimately, if those motivations are not where they perfectly need to be, and it's almost never that they are for most individuals, where they really have something that they need to improve, but they haven't improved. They want to make a difference for it, but it hasn't happened. Like, a lot of people want stuff, but not a lot of people get those things, right? So my coaches used to like to tell me, people in hell want ice water, right? It's like, just wanting it isn't enough. And so when you think about that thing, whatever it is, chances are there's some improvements to make around motivations for you. So identify and diminish the pain motivations that stop you. Almost anything that you're going to be after, there's probably some pain associated with what you're going to need to do, what you're going to need to change, what you're going to need to take on. Right? And so whatever those pain motivations are, in other words, the things that are painful about doing it, the things that are painful about making the change, whatever, achieving that goal, there's going to be some pain associated with it. Can you identify what those pains are? And then what can you do to diminish the pain around that? There's all sorts of things that we might face. Like, if I need to exercise more, my pain might be the discomfort of exercise itself. Can I diminish that? You bet. Right? Maybe I can find some exercise that's more comfortable for me, or that I enjoy more. Maybe the pain is, I don't have the time for exercise. I'm going to have to give up some of this family time, or some of the time I spend at work, or some of my just, screwing around time. And so how can I diminish that pain? There's ways to do that. Right? So you got to strategize with those pains, because if there's too much pain around anything you need to do or make happen or change, probably not going to do it. Probably not going to make it happen or change it. Then identify or put off the pleasure motivations that stop you. Now, why would pleasure stop somebody? Well, it depends on what the goal or resolution is. So if you need to, let's say, go to sleep earlier, well, there's probably pleasure around staying up, which is why you might do it, right? Maybe you need to stop eating that tub of ice cream every week, right? So there's probably a lot of pleasure in that. So stopping goals, like I got to stop something, there's almost always some pleasure associated with the thing that you can't seem to quit, the addiction, so to speak. And also think about the resolution that you might want to make, or the change that you need to make. Are there not going to be some pleasures that might not come to you as often, or you might have to give up completely, even just to a certain extent, or for some time, just to make that happen, right? A lot of times it's what we need to give up that we're not willing to let go of, that's actually stopping us from doing the thing that we could actually have so many times. So what are the pleasure motivations, the addictions, the things that you want to hold on to, but you can't hold on to them or continue with them quite the same way. It doesn't mean that you can't have any pleasure in your life. Doesn't mean that you can't enjoy life at all, but it's like, what are those pleasure motivations that seem to be getting in the way of you making this change happen. Then find and amplify the pain motivations that empower you. Now, why would pain empower somebody? I'll tell you how. Any pain that you know you will experience or that you are experiencing already that's associated with not making the change you need to make. In other words, I'm not making this change, so that's why I feel this way. That's why the pain is there. Or I'm not making this change yet. That's why in the future I'm going to have that pain. And it's kind of scary that it's going to happen at some point, someday, or maybe sooner than you think. Those are pain motivations that actually could get you off your butt. Those are pains that could drive you to do something about this. I'll give you an example. I remember, it was like 24, 25 years ago. I was in New York City. I was not doing very well financially at the time. I was in music school. Maybe those two things go together, but I was trying to make ends meet, and I was barely able to pay my rent, living in an Upper West Side, rat-infested apartment, right? It was not a nice place. But it was the best I could do at the time in New York City, right? Real estate rent is expensive. I remember going through a lot of pain around having to set all the rat traps up and having a hole in the wall of my bedroom that I know the rodents were going in and out of all night, right? And it was just upsetting to me. And I never dealt with that before in my life, right? And it was very painful. But luckily at the time, I had learned some of this technology that I'm sharing with you here. And so I thought, well, how can I use that pain to motivate me to make positive changes in my life? And I thought, well, I'd like to make more money. I'd like to be in a better place. And so if I can get off my butt and study and learn and work harder and make some things happen that most other people wouldn't do, that I am kind of lazy about, then I won't ever have to deal with this again. And what's interesting is because every time I thought about those pains, it reminded me of where I'm going in my life. It reminded me of what I wanted. It reminded me of what I didn't want as well. Instead of thinking, oh, my life sucks, I thought, what am I going to do about this? What can I change that would make it so I never have to deal with this again? You know what? I never had to deal with it again after being there. It took a while. It wasn't instantaneous, but those pain motivations actually helped me. They empowered me to have a better life, to have a different life as a result of the good work and the resolutions that I followed through on at that point and later after that as well. Finally, find and amplify the pleasure motivations that empower you. Now, this should be a little bit more obvious. Any resolution you might set, chances are there's some pleasure involved with what you're going to get from it. Now, you might say, well, Jeff, working out every day, that's not pleasure for me. There's no pleasure in that. I just know I have to do it. Yeah, but why do you know you have to do it? Chances are it's because, well, gosh, if you lost that 35 pounds, you'd feel really amazing when you saw yourself in the mirror, right? It's not feeling good to get there, but once you're there, that's amazing, right? Or, hey, if I did that every day for like 20 years, I'll be feeling amazing even as I age. And I'll feel really proud of that because, so many other people are dealing with so many problems that I'm not dealing with. It's like, I'm going to be patting myself on the back for that at that point. So there's plenty of pleasure in any resolution you might make, which is why you would make it probably in the first place. It just may not all feel good, but you can find those pleasures. You can find the pleasure motivations that could empower you and amplify those. Now, how do you amplify any of these motivations? You focus on them. Right? So the reason why, we'll give you an example, like somebody's smoking and they know they need to quit. Like they know there's pain in the future for them if they don't quit, maybe even pain in the present. Why don't they quit though? Simple. They don't pay attention to the pain, or maybe it's not in their face yet, right? They're not paying attention to the cancer they're going to get or to the emphysema that's going to kill them and feeling like they're drowning, trying to breathe, right? They're not feeling that at the moment. So they'll light up the cigarette. The pleasure of the cigarette is more than the pain of what's going to happen to them eventually. But if they focused on that day in, day out, 5 times a day, imagining the pain of that, imagining all the different emotions of that, and made it excruciating and never let up on themselves. I mean, who wants to think about that, right? So they probably wouldn't, right? But if they made themselves do it, now they're amplifying those pain motivations. You could do that with pain and with pleasure. Now, diminishing pain and putting off pleasure, there's maybe a little bit more complexity to that. There's more of a strategic approach, but the first thing you could do is not focus on it as much. People that are unmotivated, it's not that they're unmotivated. They just have motivations that cause them to go away from what they really need to do. Make sense? So if they're focused on the pain of what they need to do and they keep it right in front of them constantly, they visualize it and feel it inside, and they get this gut punch every time they're thinking about doing their next audition or eating the Brussels sprouts or going to the gym. Well, What's the likelihood they're going to do that, right? It's slim to none. And so why bother thinking about those pains if they keep you from doing what you really need to do? Best thing you could do is move those out of your mind and move some of these other more empowering motivations into your mind. And that could be done with just a little bit of conscious effort on your part, keeping stuff in front of you, writing it down, visualization. I mean, it's pretty basic stuff, right? Anybody can, with a little bit of work, start to align and line up these motivations. So that's basic motivation. Now, also mention survival needs are deeply ingrained, hardwired motivations that we all have. These are not everybody is motivated to be healthy. Not everybody's motivated to have X, Y, and Z in their life, to have a nice car or have a nice apartment or whatever. But everybody's motivated to 4 things. They're not just motivated, they have to meet these, what I call survival needs. These predict whether or not you have a psychology that sticks in the long term. Even if in the short term you can get yourself to do something temporarily, if it doesn't meet these needs to do that, or if it actually robs you, like you actually find yourself not meeting some of these needs, this will never continue. Right? In fact, almost instantaneously, as soon as the needs don't align with what it is that you need to do or change, chances are that's the end right there. So these 4, think of them as emotions, but they're emotions that, again, we have to feel consistently. Right now, you have to meet all these needs, or else you wouldn't be here. You'd be making massive changes or going insane. The first need, certainty, the feeling of consistency, the feeling that things are stable, the things feeling like predictable, having a sense of control. A lot of times people say I'm a control freak. It just means they just need certainty, and that's their way of getting certainty, right? So certainty, think stability, control, predictability, knowing what's going to happen when it's going to happen. Variety is the opposite of that. Right. But we all need variety too. Having a sense of growth, newness, change, entertainment value, novelty. Right. If we get too much certainty, we get bored. And so we need the opposite of that. We need both of these, which makes life a little tricky because you're not going to usually have the extremes of both of those simultaneously. Then significance. People don't just want certainty and variety, a little entertainment and some stability. They also want a sense of meaning, a sense of pride, a sense of purpose. Usually these are things that align with significance. This is also the ego need, feeling of strength or power, a feeling that you're better, right? A feeling that you're important, so to speak. So pride, importance, these are different elements of significance. And some people act like they don't want significance, but usually that's just because that's what they think it takes to be significant, is to act like you don't care about that. And that makes you special or different, let's say. Uniqueness is where significance is found. Some people get significance by being really successful and strong and amazing and being better than everyone around them, right? Some people get significance by having the biggest problem or being the biggest loser or being the worst at something. So people find a way to meet significance, even if it doesn't seem like it's significant. To them, it is. Unique could be good unique or bad unique is another way of saying it. And then finally, people say it's lonely at the top. The truth is the top is maybe less crowded, but it's not lonely. It's just that people are driven by significance tremendously. Many times will isolate themselves or separate themselves from others because that's part of what that significance need many times demands of us. It's like, I need to be unique. I need to be separate. I need to be different. I'm going to be over here. You guys go over there, right? We separate ourselves in a way. Some separation can be healthy and can be important, but if you're overly driven by significance, you might miss out on love and connection because you're so apart from everyone else. And love and connection is a very deep need that we all have. We all have a need for at least connection, if not actually love. So these are the puppet strings on every human being that you and I share. And we all need to meet these needs. The difference with people is not whether they got to meet these needs, because you do. The difference is how, because everybody's got a different recipes. We give recipes for certainty, variety, significance, and love and connection. And depending on what your recipes are, that may set up your psychology to do or not do a resolution that you may or may not need to make. So which of these 4 survival needs? There's another difference with people, which is that even though we got to meet all of these needs, we don't treat them equally. We operate such that we prioritize one of these needs over all the others. So you might notice people in your life that make certainty like the most important thing, like everything's got to be in place, everything's got to be under control, everything has to be really comfortable. And as soon as they're uncomfortable, it's like, hell breaks loose. Or then you know probably a few like real adventuresome people that are variety nuts. Most of us know a couple like, I dare say more ego-driven individuals who are very significance-driven, achievers among us, so to speak. And then there's others who are all about love and connection, the ones that are more family oriented or, are always hugging everybody or always so friendly, because we don't treat people lousy when we want connection with them, chances are, right? So which out of these four is your number one survival need that is driving you most? Whichever that need is, that defines a big part of your nature, about the way that you're going to operate. And a lot of times that number one need, although it's a strength, certainty could be a real strength. Like I want a certainty-driven brain surgeon, right? That really knows how to do my brain surgery, right? But if I'm going on an adventure, I probably want a variety nut. Somebody's gonna have a great time and always invent new things, right? So different strokes, right? So there's strengths that come with this, but your strength is also your weakness. Whatever you put number one, it's also going to define a lot of the challenges you might face around resolutions, changes, and goals that you need to set. If you're really certainty driven, making change is painful for you. If you're really variety driven, like committing to one relationship might be an issue, right? Or one job or one career. It's like, I'm going to get bored, right? Significance-driven people a lot of times will avoid anything that threatens their significance. And then finally, love and connection driven people, hey, if my family rejects me because I want to do this new career, or my significant other is not going to love me quite as intensely if I go and do these different things, if my relationships maybe are threatened in some way, I'm probably not going to do those things. So what's your number one? And then think about, how do you meet that need? What's the vehicle that you use? Just another way of saying how. What's the vehicle that meets that need the most for you? You get connection from your family, or significance from your money, or variety from going on as many trips as you can go on, certainty from your job, right? Different people use different things to meet these needs, but what's your number one need and the way that you most likely or most consistently and at the highest level meet that? Anything that threatens that vehicle or that need is, even if you need to do it, even if you need to take it on, even if it's a good idea for you, probably those are going to be the issues. Those are going to be the weaknesses that you face. Your strength is your weakness. So a couple questions for you on the psychology side of things. What are your most powerful pleasure or pain motivations for making or keeping your resolutions? You probably already started to think about those. And then what survival needs are in play with your resolutions? Is it that you need to strike out and do something really different, but you're not wanting to lose some certainty that might be involved with that change because it's a gamble, it's a risk? Is it that, you have this amazing family and you do everything for them because they love you for it, but the change that you need to make is not going to cater to that as much, and so it threatens a certain level of that connection? Not that they wouldn't love you, but it's just like maybe not quite at the level that you really feel like you want from them. Maybe it takes you away from your family or away from sources of connection more than you would be comfortable with. And so it's a connection thing that's in play with your resolutions. How do you need to alter things so that those same needs would make your resolutions stick? How do you need to set it up such that even though it seems like you wouldn't get certainty by doing this new thing or by making this change, that you could actually create more certainty from that? There are ways to think about it that would actually make sense. You might get more certainty by trying something new. Maybe not in the moment, but in the long term, you could create more certainty. You might even create more connection with the people that you care about and that care about you, depending on who you become and what you end up doing. Does that make sense? So it's not that these things are stopping you. It's that the way you relate to them, it's the way you're thinking about them currently. It's like thoughts, beliefs, and ideas about these things, and the way we structure them, different than someone else might, is what's actually getting in the way, not the needs and motivations themselves. Change the way you think about these, change your beliefs about them, change how you structure them and how you arrange them in your own mind, your own psychology. Suddenly these things aren't stopping you anymore. Suddenly you've got an empowered psychology where it might have seemed disempowered in the past. Another great Venn diagram with a visual reminder, things that matter, things you can control, things you should focus on, being the overlap. Yeah, it makes sense. Totally. Because if you don't control it and you focus on it, the likelihood that you'll have certainty around that is probably lower if you think you need control in order to have certainty. That's the rub. And that's where that particular model, think about this way, like that whole idea, the serenity prayer model is like only think about the things that you can do something about. Well, the reason why that works so well is that so many people need to think that they control something in order to get the certainty out of it. It's not that you can't think about things that you can do nothing about. In fact, there's plenty of things eventually in life that we normally will naturally think about, will tend to think about that we can't do anything about, at least for the moment, or that we don't think we could do anything about. And the truth is, we don't have to only think about things that we control. It can actually be empowering to think about things that we have nothing to do with or we don't control, but not if we think control is required for certainty. And so many people in our present day have been taught by parents, by family members, by people around us, coworkers, bosses, media, that you got to be in control of so much. You got to be in control of your grades. You got to be in control of your money. You got to be in control of your family. You got to be in control of your team. You got to be in control of your career. Isn't that what we're told? Like constantly, nonstop. And so like the possibility that maybe we're going to start feeling like control is important for feeling certain. It's like, yeah, it's been constantly suggested to us, like constant media onslaught that you have to be in control. You go into other parts of the world, like you visit the third world, there's many things in the third world that people have very little control over that are really critical, like just basic health and wellness issues, right? And yet many of those individuals, totally very certain people, actually some of the more confident people you'll ever meet. I've been there, I've met many of them. And so they don't have to have control. They don't even have to focus only on things they do control. They got to have certainty, and they have, well, for instance, I'll give an example, like people who use faith. Faith is, certainty about something you have no control over that you can't necessarily verify like in a scientific way, right? So people go into this emotion of faith. They're not in control necessarily, but now they feel certain as a result of that emotion, right? So yeah, great recipe for pain in life, not to mention a great recipe to stay stuck in the past or disempower yourself creating whatever you could create in the future, is focusing on control as a basis for your certainty. Because even the things that you think you control today, just wait a little while. Eventually in life, almost everything goes out of our control. And of course, as we see individuals age in the world, you could see that, for instance, the elderly population, they're losing and losing and losing what most people need, which is certainty. It's not because they can't have certainty going into those other years. It's that they're losing control, and their whole basis, their entire life for certainty has been controlling things. It works temporarily. It's not a great permanent solution. A final portion here of what we'll cover tonight, which is a powerful resolution that you can make stick. And in order to propel us there, we've got two more parts of this three-legged stool that we've been talking about. The next one after psychology is that resolution statement. Now, this is generally the simplest portion, but it is something that really still requires some consideration. So stay with me here. So there's three types of resolutions, and really three types of resolution statements, if you want to categorize it this way. There are be resolutions, there are do resolutions, and there are have resolutions. Now, a lot of us focus on the doing resolutions, like I need to go work out. Some of us focus on like having resolutions, like I want to lose 40 pounds, right? That's not doing, that's eventually I'll get there and I'll have a different body, right? Being is usually the least focused on, but it's one of the more powerful ones because of that, I think, more than anything. And so we'll get into some examples of each of these types of statements. So be statements are things like, I will become an investor. I will become a voice actor. Now that might encompass a lot of doing and a lot of having as well. But being that, it could be a goal or a resolution. I'm being resilient. I will be agile and dynamic. I'm committed to being honest. I'm committed to being reliable. These are ways of being, right? Being, many ways of being, you could just become today, right at this moment. You can say, I'm going to be reliable. I'm reliable, right? Now, maintaining that being over time, again, that's where accountability comes in. But you can declare that resolution of being in moment to moment. And in the moment you declare it, doesn't mean that's who you are. It doesn't mean that you're suddenly becoming it just because you say it, but saying it, writing it down, sharing it, that creates the possibility of that. Think of it like opening a door that you could walk through. Saying it, making the statement actually opens the door. So now, by the way, speaking of being, and this really applies, I think, to any of these statements, the things that you can't say, the things that you would never commit to, the things that you would never promise or you never even consider in language, those are the statements that would make the biggest and most powerful change for you, because you're barring yourself from that particular language, that particular statement. Make sense? So there are things that we cut ourselves off from in language at times that we won't allow ourselves to open the possibility of. And because we won't say those things, those possibilities are also unavailable to us. The possibility of something is created in language. If you won't say it, or you can't say it, or haven't yet said it, that possibility can't open the door. The door can't open, so to speak, keeps that door shut. So think about what you can't say. Think about what you won't commit to. Think about what you won't promise. Those are the elements that are probably the most powerful. Now, obviously, you got to use your best judgment with these things as well, right? But a lot of times it's our best judgment that we think is our best judgment that actually holds us back, even if it's rational, even if it's logical. So what is it that you couldn't or wouldn't say that if you said it, it would open a possibility? It doesn't guarantee success in that area, but it would open a door for you that would really, really be a breakthrough for you. It's a great way to think about how you might select your resolution statement, or at least facets of it. Let's move over to do statements. These are, again, more common. I'm going to work out every day. I'm going to have one date night with my husband per week. Really, really powerful that you can open the door just by saying, that's what I need to commit to, or that's what I am committed to. Finally, have statements. This is usually what a lot of us focus on. Like, what do I want? What do I want to have? But they could be very powerful statements. I will make $10,000 in my new career by the end of this year. I have it, right? It's not just a doing. It requires some doing, probably even requires some being to get there as well. But this is the having part. This is the fun part, usually, for most of us. I will get married, right? That's a having. Now, you could also be married, I suppose. So for some people that are married, they're not really being married, right? So maybe that being might be essential to transform that area for them. I have a strong, fit body that could do 10 pull-ups in a row, right? So it's like, that's what I have. I've already accomplished it. I have a new Tesla. Right? These are having statements. So fairly different statements. Think about what kind of statement would be the most empowering for you, knowing the context, knowing what you'd like to see happen. Different for different people. Also consider that, is this resolution something that you want to stop or that you want to start? We fill ourselves up with things that we want to start. I want to start this new career. I want to start working on that. I want to start this other thing, this other project. We pile it on, but the challenge is a lot of times that we barely had time for the things that we already committed to, and we need to probably stop something in order to make room for the thing that we really truly need or want to start, or the thing that we've already started, we're not giving enough time and energy to it, so we got to stop other things in order to make it possible for us to put the time in where we really need to put that time. So a lot of times stop goals or stop resolutions are as powerful or even more powerful than start resolutions. So a couple examples: I will start posting my actions on social media daily. I will stop wasting time with Netflix. No more surfing Facebook. I will quit my job. I made a bunch of stop examples because they're so much less common. And some of the most powerful things you can do is to let go of something or stop it. Now, how to stop that? Well, that's a whole nother conversation. It can open up a can of worms right there. But just making the resolution statement could be, again, that's what creates the possibility. That's the point of this portion of this recipe. So a couple questions for you on your resolution statement. Is your resolution to be, to do, or to have? And then is it going to be a start or a stop resolution? Really think about it. Like which way should you go? Which way would be the most important for you, do you think? By the way, could you think of it either way? A stop or a start? Could you think about it in lieu of being or doing or having? Chances are you could have any of them with many resolutions or many contexts. But how do you need to think about your statement? And then how do you need to dial that in and say it so that it actually fits with a do start or a have stop or whatever? So what's the linchpin for you? And I'm going to give you a minute on this one, because what I'm going to ask you to do at this point, once you've considered these different mechanics of the resolution statement, whatever that might be for you, come up with a resolution statement. Think about, what is my statement? What do I need to promise? What do I need to resolve? What do I need to decide? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to change? However you would say it to yourself. Okay, I got a question about, so Daria says it takes at least 21 days or 3 weeks to make a habit of anything. And by the way, whether it takes that or more or a little less, the reason why it takes that is everything that we've been talking about. The studies that have proven, it takes 21 days. The truth is, it doesn't take nearly that time when all these forces are aligned. In fact, most of your habits were probably formed in an instant of massive pain, massive pleasure, a great amount of one of the psychological ingredients that we talked about, and just the right voiceover in your mind. Those habits are many times formed almost instantaneously. The reason why it takes a while is because these types of things that people aren't likely to do, they've got to align all these forces and pull it all together. And for most people, it's going to take weeks and weeks to do that, if ever, ultimately. I'm going to update, improve social media presence. Great. Ooh, okay. So Darius says, my last day at my job is January 20. I'm going to stop 50 hours or more a week. Wow. That's quite a stop goal right there on someone else's goals so I can focus on my goal of a solid business. That's phenomenal. Really, really fantastic. And you can imagine, there's probably a lot of needs that are met by that 50 hours, right? So it's a matter of replacing that with other vehicles and finding ways to meet those needs so that you can maintain that. And you've obviously done enough to get to the point where that's actually what you're committed to, which is phenomenal. I really acknowledge you for that. I love it. Just do it and stop overthinking. That one takes the cake. I love it. Interesting. So you could see like your offer's doing work. It's not like he's doing nothing here, but then like after he does that work, it's 5 hours of chill, right? So stopping that 5 hours of chill, now you might be able to do 5 minutes or 50 minutes or something like that and still get the same need met out of less time chilling, but also get other needs met and then also create more progress by actually doing more of what he's already started to do. That's phenomenal. Really, really clear there. Land my first gig by Thanksgiving. Just now beginning marketing. Makes sense. Okay, so that's a having goal, right? It's like you're going to have to do a bunch of things and possibly be somebody that can do that can make that happen so that you can have what you have committed to have. So it might be a plan involved in that. But otherwise, very, very clear. You got a time-bound resolution there. Okay, we got another one. Donna says, finalize my vision board, which includes goals, resolutions of finance, art, voiceovers, travel, filmmaking, and writing. Fantastic. So you got a vision board you're putting together, and that's the resolution. And that vision board could make a huge difference as a motivator, right? As something to focus your energy as well. Phenomenal. Okay. All right. Beautiful. All right. Let's continue. Okay. So we've been talking about this resolution statement. So if you haven't yet done it yet, put it in writing. And the reason is this. Chats disappear, right? If you just put in the chat. Conversations disappear. If you go to happy hour tonight or tomorrow and you talk with your best friend that you have a resolution and you tell them, what happens to that conversation the moment after you had the conversation? Here's what happens. It disappears. The conversation, the things I'm saying to you right now, it's not like my words aren't just like floating into the corner. They're not collecting in some, here we are recording this. So, we're kidding this conversation to stick around for a little while, right? But for most conversations we have, that's all a resolution is, by the way. It's just a conversation. It's just words, right? So conversations disappear. And that's the problem with a lot of resolution statements. We just say it and then boom, it's gone. Right. So if we know conversations disappear, then one of the best things you can do is strategize on how can I make the conversations that I want to have stick around, that I want to hold on to, the conversations that I want to keep. How can I make those conversations have some staying power? Well, one way that I'm telling you right now is put it in writing. When you write down a conversation, that conversation, wherever it's written, doesn't disappear the moment you wrote it down. Isn't that what we do in like legal circles in most countries? We write up our agreement. Everybody signs it and says, yes, that's what I am agreeing to. And suddenly that's a conversation that doesn't just disappear, or else there's at least consequences for it, chances are, right? So when we want to record, like in accounting, right? Like the money we made, we want that just to disappear. We want the government wants to know at least what we made, so that conversation doesn't just fall out of existence. They want their taxes, right? So we write it all down, right? So type it out, print it out, get it in front of you, write it down where you know it's going to stay. The chat is great, but you want to do even more than that to keep the conversation in front of you. That's where this resolution statement really starts to be useful. If you don't do that part of your resolution statement of actually writing it down or setting it up so that you'll hear, see, imagine, focus on it on a regular basis, maybe daily, chances are, then you really didn't complete the resolution statement that I promised you here. So make sure you do that if you haven't done it already. All right. So finally, accountability. As I mentioned before, accountability follows the resolution statement. Now, if you guys have started, it's interesting. I didn't even get to this point, but you guys are talking about in the chat, hey, will you be my accountability partner? Like instantly, as soon as a resolution is made, accountability starts becoming at least possible. It's like the next natural conversation that might occur if somebody's really committed to this, right? So lots of different sources of accountability. A coach, someone who's committed to hold you accountable rather than just be your friend. Now, you can be friends with your coach as well, but sometimes you're going to hate your coach sometimes if they're really holding you accountable. A loved one or friend. Nothing wrong with getting accountability from loved ones and friends. The challenge is that there are, for most friendships and family relationships, loved ones, there are unwritten rules that dictate that there's maybe less accountability coming from those sources, right? Like we commiserate with friends, like, well, we want to all be friends. And so as soon as it starts getting, like, I promised I would do this, but as soon as my friend gets on my nerves about it, all of a sudden I'm going to poke my friend back and be like, hey, that's not very friendly that you said it that way or that you did that. And suddenly my friend's like, well, I'm their friend, so maybe I should shut up, right? With people that you like live with, loved ones, etc., it's usually even worse because most of us, most smart people realize, hey, I need some harmonious relationships in my family. I don't want to have people at my throat every day. So I better treat them well, even when they're not really following through on what they promised. And when I'm not doing that, they probably know simultaneously that's the case with me. And so they'll probably let me off the hook. So that's not usually the best source of accountability. If you've got a loved one or friend that's really amazingly like holding you accountable, despite that you're like friends or love each other, then you've got an amazing friend there. And it's a priceless relationship. Not a lot of friends and loved ones fall into that category. Your team, I know somebody on a team that I coach said to me once, I would feel guilty not doing my best when everybody else is working so hard in this project. And it's literally that's team accountability. It's like the team is working on this. They know what to expect from me. I've made these promises. Like just guilt alone as a motivator, if not actual accountability, is going to drive a lot of that action. So team accountability can be amazing if you're on the team with somebody. And public accountability can be very powerful depending on who we're talking about. Some people don't care about the public. Other people care deeply about what the public thinks. So you announce or broadcast your resolution. You put it all over Facebook or Instagram or broadcast it out to the world on your blog and see how many views you get on that and see that everybody's paying attention to whether or not you're following through as well. That could be a very, very powerful accountability. When you know that people are waiting on you, the team, the public, etc., suddenly a lot of us snap to attention and we take care of things at a very high level compared to what we might do when it's not so visible, right? So that could be very powerful accountability. So questions around this. How do you need to set up your communication reminders? How do you need to set up your calendar, your phone, your assistant, your coach? What do you need that would be most empowering for you accountability-wise? Now, as I promised, there are some finer points here with the intersections between these different areas. So I'm going to share those with you now. So let's start with alignment. Again, this is the intersection of powering psychology and a clear resolution statement. So combining great psychology with that resolution statement brings alignment to the table. So think about whether your resolution needs to be an incremental resolution versus a quantum leap. Depending on how you think about change, some people want the quantum leap or it just bores them. Other people, it's like making a big goal is totally intimidating for them and they just want to take the next step. I'm very incremental in my process. So I'm always thinking about the next immediate step versus like 10 years from now and how amazing. I still think about that a little bit, but I don't dwell on it, right? So think about, do you need to resolve one push-up versus 100 push-ups at one time, or one salad a day versus go 100% raw vegan, because the 100% raw vegan for most people is a quantum leap, right? But one salad a day, it's like that's relatively for most of us incremental. So think about what's going to work better for you in terms of what will create alignment, not what you want to do, not what you wish you could do, right? Resolutions shouldn't just be like wannabe statements. They shouldn't just be aspirational. They can be aspirational as well, but they should also fit with your psychology so you align with the resolution. If you're not aligned with your resolution, I don't care how great the resolution is. It's not going to lead to much probably. So think about, how do you need to set up alignment in terms of, does it need to be incremental or a quantum leap? Here's a couple other things to think about in terms of alignment. Your environment, the people, places, and things around you. Like, does your environment, is it conducive to alignment with this particular resolution or not? If it's not, you might need to work on your environment a bit. The people, places, and things around you, make sure that it's as supportive an environment as possible. Behaviors, like what are the behaviors that you already, have set up that are aligned with your resolution? Any behaviors that go against it or detract from it? What about skills and capabilities? Are there different skills or capabilities that you need to be trained in or learn or read about that will support you in your behaviors and environment that you want to create? What about beliefs and values? I mean, if you don't have certain beliefs and values, you might not even pursue certain skills and capabilities, and then you're just going around in circles or spinning your wheels. So what do you need to believe or value that would be in alignment with that resolution? What beliefs or values do you maybe need to change? Like, for instance, you want to, get a perfectly ripped body and run 3 marathons and be a triathlete, right? Well, if you value comfort very highly on your values list, or you value, having an easy life very high on your values list, right? That value might need to move down slightly on that values list if you're going to be in alignment with your resolution. Make sense? So you want to align values, beliefs, and skills and behaviors and environment with the goal. If it's not aligned with the goal, nothing wrong with the goal. It's not going to be aligned. Your psychology is not going to be supportive of this. Finally, identity. Who do you need to think of yourself, or who do you need to become, or what are the beliefs you have about you that may be in great alignment with that resolution, or could be in misalignment with it and detract from you actually committing to or following through on that resolution? Who we think we are, what you think you deserve, what you think is possible, what you think your capabilities are, all those things can create artificial ceilings on what's possible for you and what you might do. And those are all identity beliefs. And finally, what about your spirit and purpose? These are things that go above and beyond just the internal aspects of you, but what are things that are bigger than you and greater than you that are in alignment with the resolution that you've made, or that might be in misalignment with it? If you don't have the spirit and purpose aligned with that resolution, it takes you away from those things. Do you really want to do that? Chances are not as much as if you would if that you set it up to make it aligned. So that is some elements to think about around alignment. So a couple questions here. Should your resolution be incremental or quantum leap? We talked about that before. Which would be most empowering? How does this resolution align with your vision? What beliefs or values support or hinder this resolution? What are you going to do about that? Right? What kind of changes might you need to make, or what beliefs and values do you need to focus on that would support that alignment? Who are you that aligns or misaligns with this resolution? These are the questions to think about to help to dial in alignment. You see how that's more than just psychology? Like, hey, I'm a positive person and I believe things are possible. It's like, what is your alignment with the resolution that impacts psychology and the resolution itself? This is something that needs to be dialed in. And you can imagine many individuals that aren't really aligned with something. That's why the resolution didn't happen, not because there's something broken about them. Now let's move over to integrity, the combo of the statement itself, the word that you've given, the promise you've made yourself or others, and then the accountability that allows that to perpetuate into the future. So first of all, what brings integrity to the table with the alignment of these two, or the intersection of accountability and the resolution, is being willing to do more than talk about this, is action. It's not just talk, right? So the resolution statement is just talk. That opens the door, but to walk through the door, that's accountability. That's where your integrity really shows up. If not, with my definition of integrity, and again, don't take this like an ethical or moral judgment on my part, but you just don't have the integrity aligned with that resolution. There's just no integrity in that. Declare your resolution statement to your community so you put it at stake. In other words, a lot of people will tell you, keep your resolutions quiet. And there might be times when that could help. But more often than not, when you make your resolution public, you're putting it at stake in the matter. You're putting your integrity on the line. Otherwise, it's just dreaming for most of us. And so you might, in order to call forth accountability, say something like this to the people around you or your coach. You have my full permission and request to hold me accountable to this resolution, as well as accountable for anything that would help or hinder my progress with this resolution. Like, that's a new way to talk to people around us, right? Most of us will not say that anytime soon, right? But when you say that, you're really putting something at stake. That's where integrity really starts to take hold, so to speak. That's where accountability begins. Also, around integrity, there's a huge aspect of integrity that requires communication and follow-up. So you don't hide out when it comes to the accountability. You want to be public when it comes to your accountability. So if you have a doing resolution, let people know when it started, when you're actually doing it. That's easy to measure usually. All my clients, when they really need accountability, I'll say, Call me when you started, right? They like, I'm going to start at 3 p.m. Great. Call me by or before 3 p.m. to let me know that it started. And if it's not going to happen, you need to call me and let me know. They got to be in communication. That's not easy. Sometimes it's harder to communicate you're not going to do something versus just doing it, for that matter, just because of the peer pressure involved. When you have a being resolution, does your follow-up on communication need to be daily or weekly or monthly, or is it contextual? When it comes to being, it's a little bit more esoteric. So a lot of times it's harder to measure if you're being a certain way. So what I would advise is at the end of each week, take a look at the commitment you have to be, whoever you're going to be, whatever. I'm going to be resilient. I'm going to be excited. I'm going to be motivated, whatever. And then just look at those states of being and ask yourself, hey, this last week, was I being that way? Are there any examples of where I wasn't being that way? What about examples of how I was being that way? That's a way to manage those best practices of being. That could be very transformational for you. The more frequent, the more accountable you are. That's pretty natural. And then finally, with having resolutions, deadlines are key, and usually a plan, because again, having takes and requires a lot of different doing and being usually. So since having is the end game, there's a plan. I mean, it's fun to think about having, it's fun to talk about it, but it really takes some work to plan out. How am I going to have that next level in whatever area of my life? What do I need to do in order to get there? Who do I need to be in order to get there? And you might need to take some time to take the goal of having, the resolution that you're going to have something, and then reverse engineer it, right? Start with the end in mind, and then reverse engineer back, like, what will I do the month before? Will I do the month before that? What will I do now? And then itemize that and organize that and prioritize that into a plan. That could be really empowering for having a resolution. Without that, having resolutions are not usually as empowering as doing or being resolutions, depending on who you are, depending on your psychology. So final questions around integrity. Who will you share your resolution with? If you keep it completely private, or just in this environment, then it doesn't open the door as often and as much and in as big a way than if you were to share that with more people. I'm not saying share it with the person that's going to disempower you. Use your best judgment. But ultimately, usually the more you share this resolution statement, the more integrity that's possible there. Who will you be accountable to? Without any accountability to anyone other than yourself, assuming that you've been not so reliable in that particular resolution in that particular area, what's the likelihood that you're really going to make it happen? Probably less. Now, there's exceptions that prove the rule, but if the shoe fits, take on some accountability from someone outside of you that you know is going to make a difference in that area. And then finally, what agreements, promises, deadlines, etc. do you need to set up to make this resolution stick? That brings integrity to that statement. It's not just words. It's not just talk is cheap. It's setting up the accountability so that those words become real. That's the magic of this. It really is about as miraculous as you can find in the world, is bringing integrity to your resolutions. So few people do it, and the people that do, even if they're not perfect, a lot of times they have extraordinary results and many times extraordinary lives. Those are the people that stand out among people. Finally, commitment. This is the intersection of psychology and accountability. Use positive reinforcement to generate commitment. Commitment is not just, follow through. It's not just promising something. It's not just having some accountability. It's like when you're committed to something, it's emotional too, right? It's like you make it a priority. You focus on it. Like you're dedicated to it. You obsess over it, right? So one of the really empowering ways you can keep commitment over time is to use positive reinforcement. Now, positive reinforcement means that you give yourself a carrot, what I would call a dopamine reward, something that feels good immediately after you follow through. Now, you don't want to give yourself the reward before you follow through, as a lot of people do. It's like, wow, I really want to watch Netflix, so I'll go to the gym after that. You'll never make it to the gym, right? Because you already got the dopamine, you already got the pleasure. It's like there's no left pleasure to get after you're done. So it's just a search for more pleasure. And then that's not a very motivated or committed state to get to the gym and do things that aren't maybe so pleasurable, right? So you want to leave your dessert for after the main course. You want to leave your ice cream and cake for after the Brussels sprouts, because if you eat the ice cream and cake first, you ain't never eaten those Brussels sprouts. It's not going to happen. I've seen miracles from clients where I just saw they were letting themselves get rewards throughout their day before they did the thing that they didn't want to do, the thing that they weren't, putting the time and energy into. And I said, look, take that thing that you like and don't let yourself do it until after you've done the hard stuff, until after you've had the Brussels sprouts. Now, not everybody's committed to that, right? And so they'll get the life that they get that goes along with that. But when I've seen clients who've actually decided, put the reward, it's not like no rewards, right? It's just move it to a point after you've done the thing that you haven't been doing. Suddenly they do that stuff like crazy. Now, the reason why, let's explain this really briefly. Whenever you've done something that's hard or that's amazing or that's really extraordinary or that you've like actually impressed yourself and maybe others, a lot of times there's something that you would get for it that you couldn't get without doing it. Does that make sense? Like there's no way to get that job without the degree. There's no way to get that relationship without taking the risk and asking that person out. There's no way to get that, the body for the bathing suit you want to wear unless you go to the gym so you can wear the darn thing. You get my drift on this? There's a need that is beyond the thing that you really don't like, right? And when those things cannot be gotten and you still want those things without doing the other steps that are hard, a lot of times we'll do those steps. I mean, we're really extraordinary when that's set up that way. The problem is when left to our own devices, we do the opposite. We set all the dessert up before we get the main course, right? So you got to rearrange that for yourself. So find what's the dessert for you, what's the pleasure for you, what's the dopamine reward for you, what's the carrot for you, and then how can you set your day up, set your week up, whatever your schedule is, whatever your heartbeat of that reward is, whether you get it once a week or once a day or once an hour, how do you make it so that the things that are tough that you haven't been doing, you got to do those first. That's the key. You got to do that first, and then you can have the carrot. If you can set that rule up in a strategic way, and then you can dial it in and commit to that, not depriving yourself, but like, oh yeah, I can have it after the Brussels sprouts. Different life. That can literally be a different life for you. So you want to make sure that you get an immediate reward after you do that follow through. Just don't give it before you follow through. And then finally, don't punish yourself. Punishment does not work. We've proven this scientifically, that just beating ourselves up, banging ourselves in the head, public floggings, etc. Generally speaking, punishment is counterproductive and only depletes our ability to produce extraordinary results in our life and turn our dreams into realities. Negative reinforcement, on the other hand, can work quite nicely. Negative reinforcement is different from punishment, which punishment is like, I didn't do the thing, and so now later on, after things didn't work, and now I have pain. That's not negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is the instant that I didn't follow through the way I needed to, I start to feel a discomfort. It's like the instant I don't finish those auditions on time and I know I'm going to have to talk to my coach, it's not going to be comfortable. That's negative reinforcement. That's not punishment per se. It's negative reinforcement, right? So think of negative reinforcement like I'm riding a horse and the bit in the horse's mouth is actually comfortable unless the horse is going the opposite of the direction that I want them to go. Because I can move the bit, it pulls the horse's mouth until the horse's head is faced where we want him to go, and then I can straighten that out. And then there's no discomfort for the horse unless the horse goes in the wrong direction, and then it starts to become uncomfortable. That's negative reinforcement. That's actually why it works. We're not whipping the horse. We're not punishing the horse. We're just making it so, hey, you're going left instead of right. And so as you go left, because you're not supposed to be going left, it starts to become uncomfortable. So you're more likely, that little nudge you're given to start going right, horse goes right. So peer group expectations are also a huge part of commitment. This is where psychology and accountability come together. We tend to rise or lower ourselves to the expectations and standards of our peer group. The friends, family, loved ones, team members around you, what they think you're going to do. We tend to just do what is expected of us in general. It's a very powerful force in the human nervous system. And so you want to set yourself up for very powerful commitment, create positive expectations of what it is that you want to get yourself to do in the people around you. Now, if they're not expecting it, you got to work on that, right? Those are different conversations you got to have. But once they expect it, now you're probably going to rise to those expectations. So questions around commitment. Do people expect you to follow through on what you promise or not? Do people expect positive changes from you? Or not? What have you trained the people around you to think about you and your potential and what you're committed to and what you'll follow through on? What do they think they can count on you for? And what do they think they can never count on you for? And then is there alignment between your peer relationships and what you're accountable for? How can you align those? What deadlines, promises, consequences, etc. will you apply to this resolution so that it has teeth? Not punishment, but like some negative reinforcement potentially, right? And then who do you need to share that to? What rewards can you set up to motivate you to take action where needed? And then what enjoyment do you need to put off until you follow through? Delaying that gratification. So that is how you can make that powerful resolution. And if you align these different overlaps that we talked about, alignment, commitment, integrity, that resolution is going to stick. You do all these things. Now, the question is whether you're going to do all these things. That's the only variable in this. These elements will work and they'll make a difference if you line them up. Now, you could really attempt to do all these things, and then you might have one of these pieces that you're still challenged with. It might be still missing for you. So great. Come to the workshop that's coming up. We can work on that piece, or get a coach. We could work on that piece. That's the key. Is it's not that this won't work. It's just how to make it work for you. Well, we might need to tailor and personalize it a bit to find the linchpin that'll make all the difference in the world. That's really the only question mark that remains. Final slide here after Q&A. This is for further study. These are two books that I've read that I've found to be tremendously empowering. Don't Shoot the Dog, I read, I don't know, like 15, 17 years ago. And I'll give you an idea of what it did for me. So I, in my young life, knew myself to be someone who could never, ever do any sport without completely dropping the ball, like literally, okay? You know, I was the one they picked after the last person, the last, if I was picked at all, for kickball, baseball, and all the other sports for that matter. Because you give me the ball, you give me any kind of thing that I need to do with some coordination, and especially under any kind of pressure, I pretty much guarantee to do the opposite of what I needed to do at that time. And that was just the way I thought I was. Okay, so I read Don't Shoot the Dog, and Don't Shoot the Dog explained that I kept punishing myself. Like I would drop the ball and I would beat myself up, right? Now, the first, people would just yell at me or something, and then eventually I internalized that, right? And so that became my default psychology, is punish yourself every time you play a sport, right? You try to do something that is actually in any way like requires physical coordination, right? And so that ended up being my psychology about it. But what I learned in this book was that when you imagine and visualize where you want the ball to go, where you want the frisbee to go, how you want that particular physical action to occur, you imagine it ahead of time. You imagine it a couple times ahead of time for that matter. And then you make your best attempt. And then when you actually make your best attempt, you immediately, and I'm serious about this, you pat yourself on the back and say, attaboy, or your girl, attagirl, or whatever your pronoun is, right? Attaboy. And I literally would physically do this to myself each time I did something that I thought was decent, or that I followed through on what I at least attempted. And I got better and better and better at all these different physical activities that required coordination. Two things, literally just imagine what I wanted it to look like, calmly, simplicity, just visual, and then actually following through on what I visualized to the best of my ability, and then pat myself on the back. And it sounds kind of, kindergarten-ish, but like attaboy, and just giving myself that tiny little bit of positive reinforcement after each try, after each attempt. And I remember a couple years ago, I was in a mastermind retreat with some really great people, all of which I always figured these are all better athletes than I am. And we went bowling, and I'm thinking, okay, they're going to crush it. I'm going to be in last place. Not most empowering psychology, but I set up to bowl, and I did what I learned out of Karen's book after Don't Shoot the Dog. It's like, okay, imagine the ball going and making a strike. Imagine me doing the motions that are required to do that. I didn't know anything about bowling, and I did it each time. The end of the set, it's like I won the set. I won 2 sets out of the 2 sets that we played. And I'm like, these guys are clearly physically better than I am in any way that you could imagine. And yet I won. And I'm thinking this made the difference because nothing else had changed. So it's a really, really, really powerful book to kind of demystify the magic of what it's like to produce habits and produce new and better behaviors and performance out of yourself, because you could do this with yourself or others as well. and also what not to do as well. They'll explain it very nicely. Karen Pryor is actually a animal trainer, and like when you watch a movie where the dolphin is doing exactly what, some amazing things, or the dogs are doing these weird things, or you see the actual, like a performance where the animals are doing some amazing things. These are the individuals that make those things happen. They use the techniques in this book. And what's interesting is, like, we are not that dissimilar from training an animal, where maybe have more complications, but what works with the animals, actually, she found, worked quite nicely with people as well. And so it was a little bit of an extrapolation, but it's explained very clearly in the book. Power of Habit, another really great book that stems from Karen Pryor's work, that also drills down into trigger activities that actually perpetuate the new behavior that you want to create. It covers some things that aren't covered in Don't Shoot the Dog. So I'd highly recommend checking out these two books when you have a chance. Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, Don't Shoot the Dog by Karen Pryor. They should be available in your local Amazon page. So with that said, thanks for taking part in this time together that we had today. When you put this kind of time in and you put real energy into making a difference in your life, it sets you apart from most other people, frankly, because most people won't be caught dead in an environment where they're trying to go to the next level. They're finding what's not working and making it better and making a difference. This isn't comfortable stuff. And for those that really need comfort in order to have certainty met, chances are they're not going to be in this particular conversation. So really do just want to acknowledge you for, especially at this point, if you're still sticking around in this conversation, for sticking out to this time. We went way, way, way over, like double the time that you were supposed to spend, and yet you participated in the entirety. So if the shoe fits, just hats off to you. And I know that there's going to be so much more possible for you in your life with just that willingness to step it up into this type of conversation. So with that said, I'll hopefully be talking to you in that workshop that's happening. But if not, I hope our paths cross again soon. Take care until then.